I think a lot of people have maybe now seen some of the weapons that are being used, but I was just presented with a few and want to pick them up. I mean, this is what our police are using on us.
Can you describe like what each is, or you know?
I don't know what this is. This is
that is a flashbang.
This is a flashbang. This is a smoke bomb. C4. And perhaps the most troubling are these. When we hear rubber bullets, we think little bullets that are made of rubber. These are enormous. They have caused eye damage. They have caused loss of sight in Denver. Just before I came down here, I spoke with a young man in the hospital. He was struck on Monday night and has been in and out of the hospital since, in and out of surgery the last couple of days. His brain has been, or his skull has been fractured. He has 30 stitches. That's what these are inflicting. And yet the police continue to do it. They've seen those news reports of people who've lost their vision, of people with skull fractures, and yet they're still out there using these. And they're aiming them at people's heads. These are not meant for that. They're using them improperly. So until the city can be trusted, until our police officers can be trusted, and until we can be sure that if they're using force, that they're not using force to dominate, to show who's in charge, to put protesters, to put demonstrators, to put our citizens in their place. Until we can ensure that, we need to stop their ability to use these weapons. We filed the lawsuit in the Denver District Court because I wanted the citizens of Denver to get to decide. We asked for a jury trial. The city decided they didn't want that. They moved that to this court here. So now the citizens of Denver won't get to decide that. And here we are in front of this courthouse instead of having our hearing today. The city will have another weekend where they can inflict more grievous injury, potentially crack more skulls, take out more eyesight, and hopefully not anything worse. I can't tell you how many people I've met and spoken with that have been hit in the head, but thankfully they're wearing helmets. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our incredible plaintiffs. I'd like to first introduce Agaze Abai.
I'm here today because we do not need another sacrificial lamb to let us know that police do not need to be attacking peaceful protesters. I was present for the first several nights of the protest, and I couldn't help but notice that it's turned into a game of tug of war with law enforcement. That's not what this protest is about. This is not a game of tug of war. This is about justice. And when we show up to be heard, to ask for justice, we should not be met with tear gas. We shouldn't be met with rubber bullets. We shouldn't be met with force. That's all I really have to say right now. Thank you.
I'd like to thank you all for coming out today. My name is Gabriel Thorne. I'm a veteran of both Iraq and Afghanistan, and I'd like to draw a parallel here between those events and what we're witnessing right now. In my time in the military, I've witnessed force being applied in the wrong way. And what I'm witnessing right now on the streets of Denver is, again, force being applied in the wrong way. Police are not meant to be a violent, oppressive force in our cities and against our citizens. They are meant to be our own citizens helping us in our day-to-day lives. I think we ask too much of our police. We treat them in a way as the handymen of society, and there are so many roles that we put police in that they are not equipped for, and that leads to them responding violently in ways that we have seen, unfortunately, the results of recently and in the past decades and centuries. The unfortunate use of these less lethal, because I won't call them non-lethal because they are entirely lethal weapons, is not only indiscriminate by the Denver police and police departments across the nation, as we've seen in videos, but is also misuse. You're not supposed to aim rubber bullets at people's heads. That's not how you're supposed to use them. The wanton use of pepper balls, tear gas, flashbang grenades on peaceful protesters is absolutely unwarranted. It's unacceptable, and we cannot tolerate it as a city. That's not what Denver is. That's not what we're about, and we cannot allow that to stand anymore. So I hope that the people of Denver will join with us and will support us in our efforts to put some restraint on the police department. Thank you.
Hey, Gabriel, before you go off, can you talk about what happened to you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And you too. Can you?
So my experience, I was down there Friday night and Sunday night. Friday night was the most extreme night that I witnessed. I was acting as a medic, using some of my previous training. What I saw was essentially a standoff after the peaceful marches around the Denver City Council building, or Denver City Hall, with police on one side of Colfax and protesters on the other, where police were firing pepper balls, tear gas, rubber bullets, and flashbang grenades indiscriminately into a crowd of protesters who were largely chanting and standing there with signs. The biggest issue I have is that there was no target discernment. There was no effort by police to try to root out demonstrators who may have been trying to provoke them or trying to engage police in any sort of violent action, like throwing water bottles or whatever, which, okay, if you're throwing water bottles at a fully armored riot cop, then that's debatable as to whether or not that warrants any sort of less lethal response. But there was no discernment. It was simply firing into a crowd of people to try to assert dominance over them. And then around 9 o'clock, they just gassed the entire crowd to push them out of the Capitol area. Do you want to talk about what you saw?
So as I stated earlier, I was present for the first 3 nights, and a little after, but Thursday night when the protest began and we marched down 16th Street, we were followed by police. We made it down to the Highlands, where I guess that's where it got ugly. It began to get ugly. We were met with tear gas and threats of shooting rubber bullets. A few people backed up, a few other protesters did not. They stood their ground, hands up peacefully, chanting justice for George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, whom I might add, Breonna Taylor's birthday is actually today. And we mourn with you. We mourn with the family, and we remember you. As things began to get aggressive, More police officers showed up wearing riot gear. Protesters started chanting, "Why are you wearing riot gear? I don't see a riot here." Things began to get aggressive. More tear gas was thrown. More rubber bullets were shot. That was my first time experiencing tear gas. Unfortunately, it wasn't my last. Friday night, I played volunteer medic with a few other people. And throughout the course of the night, I caught myself having to drag unconscious people out of a cloud of tear gas and pepper spray with rubber bullets flying all across. I got tear gassed several times, and at one point, I couldn't open my eyes for a good 10 to 15 minutes. I helped clean up a man's hand who had been shot and was bleeding badly from the hand. This man was in and out of consciousness, and me and a few other volunteer medics stuck around until ambulance showed up, and we actually had to help lift this guy up to get him on the ambulance. As the night progressed, I ended up having to help several other people who couldn't see because they were just drowned in tear gas. One particular person that stuck out, and I didn't get his name, but he looked like he might have been 18 or 19 years old, just a kid, was really blinded, in tears, and uncontrollably shaking because he's never been in a environment that hostile before. I doubt he's ever been in an environment where he felt threatened by the police before. As I tried to pour milk over his eyes to calm the pain, he expressed to me that he couldn't breathe and he was hyperventilating. So I had to help calm him down. And while this is going on, mind you, there is still tear gas being thrown. There are still bullets flying. It took a good 6 to 7 peaceful protesters to create a human wall between us and the police to keep him and I and the other medical volunteers from getting shot. A few of the people who created that human wall did get shot by rubber bullets, and unfortunately, in the midst of the chaos, I couldn't stop to see how they handled that. But we were constantly moving, constantly trying to help those who were injured, constantly trying to carry those who couldn't see or couldn't walk because they had got shot in the leg, or because they were just tear gassed and pepper sprayed too badly to see where they were going. I might have stuck around that night. This, again, was Friday night. I might have stuck around till close to midnight until I was just too worn out to continue. And as I left, I noticed more police cars, vans with policemen hanging out on the sides, riding around, and it really turned into a game of cat and mouse as these protesters began to scatter, and the protesters, their numbers began to decrease. Police would try to catch them either as they were leaving or as they were running away from the bullets. The best way I could describe that night was, it was like a game of cat and mouse. Saturday was no different. I came a little late. I had no plans on showing up Saturday because I knew I needed to take a break. I needed rest. I needed a mental break from the past 2 nights. Around 9:30 p.m. Saturday night, my convictions made me go out. After seeing what I saw the previous night, I couldn't just stay home. So I get out, and I got to witness another game of cat and mouse. The person who was out with me got hit by a pepper ball, and luckily it didn't blast, so we got to take it home as a souvenir. Another person that was standing near me got hit by a beanbag, which he also took home as a souvenir. As the night progressed and the number of protesters began to decrease, the number of cops began to increase. As I stated earlier, it really turned into a game of tug of war where It seemed like the goal of the police wasn't to keep things calm or peaceful, but it escalated into wanting to get payback. They seemed to be mad at these protesters. And that showed in the way they behaved throughout the night. I showed up again to a protest last night and the night before, where there were several hundred people out and little to no police. And those past 2 nights were the calmest I've ever seen. It really makes you wonder if the agitators are the protesters or law enforcement. Thanks.
Hello, I'm Amy Schneider, and I'm here to talk about exactly what happened to me this past week. But, you know, more than that, the bigger picture is I've been doing this for the last decade of my life. I've been in the streets countless times. I've seen police brutality against protesters. I've seen people's heads slammed into sidewalks, but nothing compares to what has happened in this past week. This entire city has been turned into basically a war zone by the Denver Police Department, and it is injuring and traumatizing people across the city, and something actually needs to happen. I've seen flash grenades aimed at people's heads. They've been aimed at my head while I was just standing there trying to get away from the tear gas and away from the police who were threatening to shoot us for no reason other than standing on Colfax Avenue. I have been gassed so bad that when it went down my throat, I genuinely thought that I was dying for a second. I could not breathe, and actually some of the people behind me helped save me and make me feel okay again. But Monday night was really one of the most traumatic nights of my life. I wasn't going to go to the protest, but had a very weird feeling that I needed to be there. Who knows if that feeling was right or not. But a friend and I decided to stick back because we had a bad feeling. The people around us were pretty much all people of color, and we saw the cops lining up, and we're not willing to take the risk of leaving these people behind without even trying to help anyone. The cops stayed up at the top of the hill for a while we lined up on the street, some people on their knees, some people on the ground face down. Some people blasting Bob Marley, people dancing and singing, and just being all around the very definition of peaceful. I don't know what exactly set it off. I'm assuming absolutely nothing based on my past experiences seeing police attack protesters. But suddenly the gas came out. My friend and I had already been, kind of towards the back, waiting to help anyone who had gotten gassed. We both had the baking soda solution ready to go. And it actually seemed to calm down for a second after people got gassed. A lot of people went a different direction than we did, and I think a lot of them did get home, although they were in, I'm assuming, excruciating pain after the amount of tear gas, because for about 200 people who were left on that street, there was enough tear gas that it filled Capitol Hill. But I went a different way with my friends because we heard that they were targeting medics, which, that's not even legal in actual war. And we saw a group of medics. They were young. One of the people who was with their group was 18. I think actually 2 or 3 of them were 18. And they were terrified. They were running full speed, telling us that they were targeting medics. And so we followed them to make sure that they would be okay if anything did happen. And not that far from here, I guess, 13th and Lincoln, actually kind of far from here. But suddenly we were surrounded. We were just trying to get home and make sure that the people around us got home safely as well. But out of absolutely nowhere, there were 40 or so cops in full riot SWAT gear. I don't know what it was. It was too chaotic to even really remember what they looked like in that moment. All with pepper bullet guns pointed directly at our heads. And now this is the second time that I have had some form of gun pointed at my head during these protests, which, as people have already spoken to, is lethal and not how these weapons are meant to be used at all. I've seen them point down at the ground. There is a very big difference between doing that and pointing at people's feet and pointing at their heads. It is very clear, and I just want to make that very, very clear. I got hit in the head with pepper bullets. I got hit in the leg. This is my worst bruise. It's not as bad as it should have been, based on the pain that I was in. But most of my injuries are actually invisible. After getting shot with countless pepper balls and watching medics be trapped in a tiny little alcove, probably 6 of them, trapped in this tiny little space, getting pelted by pepper bullets. None of us could breathe. None of us could see. We felt like we were literally on fire in this moment. I got tackled. I had my hands up. I was begging to go home, telling them all I was trying to do was get home safely and make sure everyone around me got home safely. And yet I got tackled by someone twice my size. And I'm not exactly like the tiniest person. He was that big. My entire right side of my body is injured right now. I couldn't walk until this morning. My neck can barely move. My shoulder is in pain 24/7 right now, as well as every other piece of me, for no reason other than standing on the street and trying to get home and trying to keep medics safe. While I was on the ground, my arm was wrapped up in my sweater, and I couldn't get my hands behind my back fast enough for this officer, who pushed my head into the ground, into the dirt, into the wood. Luckily, I was on dirt and not concrete like some of the others around me. And told me to stop being an idiot and stop being over dramatic, while I screamed at the top of my lungs that I could not breathe. He told me that if I wanted to breathe, I could have stayed home. This at a protest for a man who was killed while screaming that he couldn't breathe. That is the police's reaction to us fighting for justice for him and for every other Black person who has been murdered across this country on an almost daily basis. So after being told that if I wanted to breathe, I could have stayed home, we were all put in a van where one of the medics was having a severe asthma attack, coupled with a panic attack because the cops pulled his mask down to mace him. They denied him medical attention and once again told us all that if we had wanted to breathe, we could have stayed home. If we wanted water, we could have stayed home, and that we were all going to jail for a year for being on the streets. So my story is not unique. This happens a lot. You know, there are dozens of other people in this city who have very similar, if not far worse stories than what I just told you. And let me tell you, that was really bad and really, really traumatizing, and it didn't need to happen at all. And that is all, I think.
Hi, my name is Mike McDaniel, and I just wanted to correct the record briefly. Yesterday's Denver Post headline said that 4 protesters were suing the city, but as you've heard tonight, that's not the case, and that's not the case with me. I was not a protester. I didn't chant, I didn't have a sign, I didn't march. And not that this is something that protesters actually do, but I want to counter the narrative. I certainly didn't spray paint anything, I didn't start any fires, and I didn't break any windows. I was strictly there to help people that needed help, which is what happened in an alley on the northeast corner of Colfax and Broadway, across from the Capitol, when a man came literally staggering and crawling out of a cloud of tear gas. And this was a Black man. I think it's important that we also counter the narrative that this is all white instigators causing issues. This man was out there speaking with his own voice. I went over and met him in the alley. He was on the ground. I kneeled over him. My back was to the cops. Initially, their back was to mine. I poured milk on his face, and I told him to be all right. They turned around and opened up on us. There was only 2 of us in the alley. There was nobody there. I don't think a video of this exists, but anybody who watched that video, no one would think that I was a threat to anybody, to any policeman, to any individual, to any private or public property. I was strictly there helping this guy out. Nonetheless, they opened up on us with pepper balls. We scattered. They turned around again. I went back to him. I helped him out. I cleared him up. He shot a little selfie video with me. And if you're watching this, I forget your name, but we went through something interesting together, and I honor you, and Black Lives Matter.
So, the one thing I want to emphasize here is those were 4 stories out of thousands. Every day, for the past week, for the past 8 days, and getting ready to start day 9, police have committed these types of acts. And worse, lesser, but this type of violence against thousands of Denver citizens. And unless it goes viral, a video is caught and it goes viral, we're not talking about it. None of these 4 voices you heard, like many of the thousands that have been brutalized by these police officers, are on camera, but that doesn't mean that their assaults didn't take place as well. And at that, I'd like to turn it over to questions.
Mike, so were you a medic?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sir, your overall, this is for you, since you're coordinating this. It sounds like I haven't read your complaint. It sounds like I hear a theme that you're not opposed to police possessing these weapons. You just want them to be used correctly. Tell me if I'm right or wrong.
Right now, I'm not convinced that they can be used, that the police are capable of being trusted to use them constitutionally. They have not shown that they are worthy of that trust, that they are trained to be worthy of that trust. It's not just about training, but that is a big problem. If they're not trained, if they're using these in ways they're not supposed to be, that is a civil rights violation for everyone. But also, even if they are using them within the realm, but using them with aggression, with an intent to put others down, to put people in their place, that also is a dire, it's a violence to our civil rights and to our individual integrities.
So I actually have a question for you as well. Kind of to clarify off of that, it sounded like you were asking for these non-lethal weapons, at least temporarily, to not be used during the protests. If that's the case, can you name which weapons specifically, and are there any non-lethal weapons that would be okay to continue using right now?
I don't know. I haven't seen the police use any non-lethal weapons in a constitutional manner, so I can't speak to that.
So all of them then?
The 5 that are mentioned here, yes, they have used each one of those in openly unconstitutional manners.
So Milo, I've been speaking with all the different law enforcement agencies that have assisted DPD, and they're using their own less lethal munitions too, and some of them differ from what DPD is using. And DPD has told me they're free to use what they want, they can use it when they want, and they're in charge of their disciplinary process for potential misconduct. What are your thoughts about that?
So I hadn't heard that. I know that there have been other municipalities out here. We've asked the judge, we've asked the court to not only restrict the use of Denver police, but other municipal police departments operating at their invitation. I can't necessarily speak to it, but it's certainly, at first blush, really troubling if the city is inviting other police departments in to also violate our civil rights, but with no remedy for our citizens, at least in our own staffing of our own police department and our own police policies.
Milo, can you talk about next steps here?
Well, I haven't checked my email in about 45 minutes, but I'm hopeful that we're going to have a hearing here today. If not, I expect the judge to schedule a hearing where these 4 voices and many more will come into the courtroom and show their bruises and show their fractures and tell their stories about how the police have hurt them, have brutalized them, and have just infringed on their right to protest, on their right to assemble and to speak. All right, I want to thank everyone for coming out. We'll make sure that you all know about our next hearing and when we'll be, I believe, in this building. Laura, will we be in this building? We'll be right here. We'll be right here on the 9th floor. And we hope you all attend on Monday, or I'll let you know if it's this afternoon. Thank you. And we hope it's a safe weekend.